Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about people left behind. So let's get into it. So the question in question was posted on a video that I made, which is called "How Can a Program Build Up Their Courage?" And I suppose that I used a term here that the commenter latched onto. Hi Frederick, regarding the quote-unquote people who IT has left behind, do you mean they let their skills stagnate to the point where they become obsolete and irrelevant? For example, something like they're limited to jQuery, PHP, and raw SQL on the back end and don't know anything about modern front-end libraries or using containers, for example. Uh, yeah, yes and no. So this is where knowing your own market a little bit is very important. So I get at least a few whenever I do like a video where people ask me about how do you measure seniority, Frederick? What type of questions do you ask people, etc., etc. And I always throw in something like, oh, this person claims to have so and so many years and they're obviously not equipped to deal with these sorts of issues. I always get someone on the comments or something like that that tells me I'm elitist, tells me that I don't know what I'm talking about, etc., etc. And I keep on, like, I never get to follow up on these people, but I would be amazed if it doesn't turn out that either we are working in very, very different industries, or we are working in very different regions of the world where the requirements might be different, or that they are working that we're working at very different scales or like different levels of software, and I can some of them I'm guessing are not working in the same sort of companies that I'm dealing with. But basically, the reason why I say that you need to understand your market is because when I say, for example, that yeah, jQuery, who uses that, right? Uh, that's not necessarily true because it depends on where you are. There are definitely companies who are still using jQuery. There are definitely regions of the world where PHP is much more popular than, say, in my part of the world. The thing that I try to express to people when I say that someone has been left behind or where you have let your skills stagnate is when you don't really have a good awareness of what are the requirements within the region that you are looking for work. Because and this I can't really think of a nicer way of putting it without, and I still am going to get people who get upset with me, but to me this is as obvious, it's very obvious, where if you have a professional race, like a Formula 1 race car driver who is competing at the highest levels of racing, sit down with a taxi driver and tell them that they are not good enough to race, that is an obvious statement, in my opinion. Like they don't probably have the necessary training to race in a Formula One car, and that difference, maybe not as extreme. I'm trying to dramatize it a little bit here. That difference is also there in every profession, guys, in the whole world. There are carpenters who basically who fuck over every client that they have because they build things in a subpar way, and then horrible things can happen, especially like now what you saw in Turkey, for example. Like, these things are a reality. It is a fact that they have different levels of skill, and people who are stagnated and have outdated skills but somehow manage to get by on those skills because their circumstances that they find themselves in allow that to continue happening. But what I say when I talk about someone who has been left behind is that they haven't adapted to the market and the specific roles and like the companies that they want to work in a good way. And I've done quite a few interviews now, guys, with quite a few developers who have the same quote unquote title, and then I talk to one person who's working in one way in one part of the world, and I can tell that they won't survive in a serious IT company because, as you were saying, they really only know some small scale to, like, I'm not saying PHP per se now, guys. I'm just saying that they don't really know, for example, how to. You're talking about containers. Yeah, containers is a very big thing in large scale development at this point. It's not just containers, but we're talking about fairly mainstream tools. Like in front end, everything is about SPAs these days. Almost back end development is basically there's a range of languages, but you're going to have to adopt some basic DevOps skills. You're going to have to know about things other than just the application coding itself testing, all of these sorts of things that you may not need to do if you're working at smaller scale or on smaller projects where you don't really have those requirements, or it doesn't even have to be a small project, it just must be a really shitty one where they don't follow mainstream practices or like what we consider bleeding edge practices, like the sort of things that you expect from the larger IT companies. And I've often wondered that myself, like if it really is true that Google and Facebook and like the fan companies, are they really that difficult to get into, or is it that the people who keep on complaining about their recruitment processes are people who literally have these sorts of limitations, who don't understand that there is a difference between working within a racing team and working as a cab driver. You will still make money, you will still have a job, and you can call yourself a driver because they're both drivers, but you're doing it at very different levels. And that is the thing that leaves you behind. If you have no real understanding of the sort of expectations that companies put on you as a software developer in your region or in the region you want to work, then it is likely that you get left behind. And as jQuery might be a good example of that. It is definitely something that is falling in popularity, at least in my parts of the world, very much so. And it's the same thing with all technologies. That's why this is a moving industry, guys. And keeping yourself up to date and understanding what is considered to be mainstream and like most like modern practices and so forth is it's an important part of the job. If you don't want to get to all of a sudden to a bunch of interviews and realize that actually you're getting a lot more rejections than you're getting accepted. I mean, if you're a senior software developer and you have relevant tool knowledge and so forth, it's fairly easy for you to get a job. So if you're seeing that you're not really seeing the traction that you're looking for in like basically most of the job interviews, it might be that you are getting a little bit outdated, or like you've lost your passion or something like that. And these are the people who usually have issues, at least from what I can tell. Because I mean, even people who have a modicum of experience, they don't have to be top notch or anything like that, will still find plenty of work for them, as long as they at the very least know the tools that the companies are using. So what I want you to take away from this is that when I talk about people that IT leaves behind is, yes, I'm not saying jQuery, PHP, or like things like that. I'm saying that people who don't understand that this is a moving industry, and that companies have like tools go in and out of favor, and certain practices become more mainstream versus others and so forth. And it comes down to sort of understanding your ecosystem a little bit. And it varies, of course, from industry to industry, like depending on where you are in the world, what type of companies you are working for, and so forth and so forth. I usually, like most of my career, I've spent working in the larger scale companies or like trendy startups and stuff like that. So I usually have a fairly good understanding of what people consider to be the bleeding edge, or what the most modern, like assuming now like that they're not, I don't know, using something that is like exclusive to a specific company or to a specific fan company or something like that. I'm talking about most of what mainstream programming is about these days. And so when I talk to people who don't really have a background working with these sorts of companies, basically working more with, say, older stacks or stacks that are not really favored as much for large scale development, such as, say, PHP, not saying PHP is bad, because like I've worked for big companies that make PHP work as well. It's just not as common as, say, C# or Java or whatever you might have, right? Then they find very quickly that, oh, okay, I have a stack, or like I have a set of skills here. They're not as in demand anymore. That doesn't mean that they can't adapt, but the people who get left behind is that they do get left behind because they don't realize that the sphere of what you need to know, like containers and like Kubernetes or doing basic DevOps, etc. So that these things are just coming, more and more stuff. The times where you could just do like 10 years ago, it might have been a different story, but things are moving and they are evolving, and that is part of IT. And it's not moving so fast that you can't keep up. That really only happens if, as I said, you have the factory workers mindset, where you clock into your job, you only do whatever your job requires, you don't keep track of any, you don't check the newsletters or anything like that, you don't take the time to keep yourself updated with relevant tools and so forth. That's fine, make those choices, but then you also have to understand that you run the risk of realizing later on that actually I don't really know most of the things people are asking in the interviews at this time. That is what happens when IT leaves you behind, where people, like, even if you've coded for years and years and years, you simply don't know the tools and practices that most of the companies want from someone with your background. Have a great day.